Good afternoon and welcome to the next in our series of webinars about the Solicitors Qualifying Examination, or the SQE. It's a National Apprenticeship Week, so today we're going to be talking about Solicitors Apprenticeships, and specifically this session is going to be targeted at those who are interested in doing one. Now, I hope everyone's doing okay. You join me on a frosty but sunny day in lockdown Birmingham. I'm struggling as my hair gets gradually more terrible. I'm also struggling that my shirt has always been terrible, but I'm at least relieved that I'm not appearing as a cat, which probably will make no sense to anyone unless you have been following the news and been seeing that feline filters have been causing havoc in the courts. Luckily, I'm joined by four far more presentable people than me. And firstly, we've got Julie Brannan, who's our Director of Education and Training here at the Solicitors Regulation Authority. Julie is a solicitor and previously Director at law school, but now is the mastermind behind the SQE. And I'm really pleased and delighted to be joined by three solicitor apprentices. We've got Angelina Ayton, who's an apprentice working in Bailey and Wright Co-Solicitors, a small firm specialising in childcare, education, employment law. Then secondly, we've got Owen Richardson, who's an apprentice working in the city firm Gowling. That's one of the largest firms in the country with a big international profile. And then finally, we've got Amy Maron, who's not working in a law firm, but in the legal team in-house at BPP, which is an organisation specialising in education. I'd like to point out that Amy is actually our first Paralympic medalist and swimming world champion we've had on these webinars, but hopefully we can reassure people that you don't need to be an elite athlete to have a successful career in the law. So in terms of the format of today, first off, we're going to hear from Julie, and she's going to give us a little bit of an explanation about apprenticeships and how the SQE fits into that. But then we want to spend most of the session having a chat with our solicitor apprentices about their experiences, what they've learned, and hopefully they can share a few tips. The final thing to say is thank you for everyone for joining us, but also thank you for those of you who sent questions in advance. We're going to try and pick them up as we go through the webinar, but actually you can send in live questions on the link below if you've got a question you'd like us to answer. We've had loads, but we'll try to get through as many as possible. So first off, over to you, Julie.
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. I've got some slides to run through with you. So turning to the first slide there, this is just sets out at a high level what the solicitor apprenticeships are. So it's a long programme, it's 5 to 6 years. But it's, as the slide says, an earn as you learn programme. So you're in paid employment in a legal organisation. It can be in-house or it can be within a big company, or it can be also within a specialist law firm. And so you're doing your job while you're studying at the same time to qualify as a solicitor. It's aimed at post A-level students. You do have to have A-levels or equivalent. So our requirements, I think somebody asked a question about this, what you have to have is 5 GCSEs at A star to C or 9 to 4 in the new system. And you have to have 3 A-levels. I think it's minimum of grade C, but check with the particular employer because some of them may specify their own A-level requirements. It can also, though, be done by people who are older, people who already have a degree, people who already have a law degree, and the training providers, the providers who offer the training element of the apprenticeship, will tell you how much time you can effectively shorten your apprenticeship by. If you've already, for example, got a law degree, that may well take it down to 2 or 3 years instead of the full 5 to 6 years. And as we said, it's earn as you learn. And the beauty of it, therefore, is that not only are you earning a salary while you're on the programme, but also the cost of your training and your exams is covered. So you don't have to pay extra to get your professional qualifications. And it's the great advantage compared with going to university, where obviously you are having to pay for your university qualifications. Apprenticeship, cost of training and exams is all covered. So if we move on to the SQE, the Solicitors Qualifying Examination, on the next slide, the thing about the apprenticeship is that it incorporates this new exam, and I'll explain in a moment how it does that. But the SQE is the new way that solicitors will all qualify from the 1st of September 2021. So coming up very fast now, the first exams will be running in November later this year. So it's we're getting very close to the launch of the SQE. And the thing about the SQE is that everybody who qualifies as solicitor takes the same exam. So if you've been to university, or if you're doing the apprenticeship, you'll all end up taking the same exam. And there are actually, and just to pick up the final point on that slide, to be clear, it's not a course, it's an assessment, it's the exam. And that's why the actual preparatory courses are flexible. So you can do it through going to university, you can do it through your apprenticeship, you can do it through sort of focused online courses as well. So there's lots of choice there about how you prepare to take the SQE. But what we require as the Solicitors Regulation Authority is set out in this jigsaw puzzle. Everybody has to have a degree or equivalent, and I'll go on to explain what that means for apprentices in a moment. Everybody has to pass the SQE, and there are two parts to that, and again later on in the slides I'll pick up what those two parts are. You have to do qualifying work experience, so you have to have some experience of working in legal services, providing legal services for clients, and you have to meet our suitability requirements. Everybody who's admitted as a solicitor, as you would expect, needs to have the right character and suitability. So that's what the SQE is. Now, what does that mean for apprentices? If we can turn to the next slide, we can translate those requirements into what that means for people coming through the apprenticeship route. The first thing is that the degree or equivalent, that requirement is made out by your apprenticeship. The solicitor apprenticeship is actually a level 7. Technically, it's a level 7 apprenticeship. That means it's actually set at master's level. So it's a tough qualification. That's why it takes 5 to 6 years to get there, and that meets our requirement for a degree or equivalent qualification. You will take SQE1 during the first stage of the SQE during your apprenticeship, and the second stage, the SQE2 stage, at the end. I'll explain those in a bit more detail in a moment, but just for now, SQE1 is a test of legal knowledge and SQE2 is a test of legal skills. And your qualifying work experience will be part of will be met, in fact more than met, by the time you spend on your apprenticeship. We say that must be 2 years full-time equivalent experience in the workplace. And of course, you know, if you're on an apprenticeship which lasts 5 to 6 years, inevitably that's going to be much longer than our minimum requirements. I would also just pick up, I think, another question that came through. When you're on your apprenticeship, the way that it works is that most of your time will be spent in the office. So I think the requirement is that you spend 80% of your time in the office and 20% of your time is out of the office doing your classroom-based training for SQE1 and SQE2. And in many cases, what that means is 1 day a week is spent in the classroom and the rest of your time is spent in the office. But I think Ben, our apprentices, will talk how that works, talk to us about how that works for them. So if we move on then to the next slide, this slide sets out in a little bit more detail how the functioning legal knowledge assessments work. This is SQE1, this is the test of your legal knowledge, and obviously we as the regulator have to be sure that everybody that we admit knows the law, and we test that through 2 separate examinations with 180 questions in each. So it's a lot of testing, and they cover a very, very broad range of all the legal knowledge that you have to know in order to practice safely as a solicitor. They will take the form of computer-based assessments. It'll be multiple choice, single best answer questions that you will run through and you will take sitting at a computer. And they're designed to test that you can take your legal knowledge and apply them to the sorts of problems and transactions that your client will have when they come through the door, come into the office. So they're intended to represent very much the sort of questions and queries that a day one solicitor would encounter in the office. Ethics, of course, is really, really important to us. All solicitors must practice ethically. They must have high standards of honesty and integrity, and those questions will go all the way through the examinations. We say they're unflagged because it won't come with a nice little label saying here is the ethical question. It'll be for you to spot that there is an ethical element to the question and to address it appropriately. Just like it is in the office, you know, you have to spot when an ethical question arises. That's part of your competence as a solicitor. Then moving on to the next slide, this is SQE2, the practical legal skills assessment, and SQE2 takes the form of 16 written and oral tests. That's actually 12 written tests and 4 oral tests. Again, lots of testing here, and these skills will simulate the sort of tasks that will be carried out by a solicitor, a day one solicitor in practice. They'll involve interviewing a client or making a presentation that's like the sort of presentation that you might make in a court, doing a piece of legal writing a letter of advice to your client, doing a piece of legal research. Those are the sorts of exercises that you'll be required to do. And they will test your legal skills, but also that you can apply your legal skills in to particular legal contexts. And so it tests both skills and application of legal knowledge equally. And again, ethical questions will crop up all the way through those exercises. And then just finally, here's a slide which gives you a link to where you can find out more. We've got lots of information on our website, and there's also lots of information on the government website. So do take a look and you can dig down and find out a little bit more detail about how it all works.
Thank you, Julie. That was great. Now, we've had a few questions come in, so perhaps I'll just sort of quickly fire through that. And I think you did pick up some of them, but just to double check on them. So firstly, we've had a question from Nazir and then also Katie. Can a politics graduate apply for a legal apprenticeship? And then Katie's asked, can you do an apprenticeship with a non-law background?
Yeah, so you can, yes, you can pick up the apprenticeship, and if you go and have a look at the apprenticeship providers, they will tell you roughly how much credit you will get as a graduate. But what I would expect is you can jump straight into what we call the graduate solicitor apprenticeship. So that will be a lot shorter, and it's a lot more compressed. So there's still the same amount of knowledge to learn and the same endpoint standard, but you certainly can do that, and it won't be the full 5 to 6 years.
And so then on a sort of similar theme, we've had someone who's 28 ask, could I still do a solicitor's apprenticeship even though I'm 28? And I think the answer to that is yes.
Most certainly, there is no age limit on your ability to start as an apprenticeship. And I think I heard somewhere, not as a solicitor apprenticeship, but I think I heard somewhere recently that the country's oldest apprentice has started, who's in his 70s. He's not a solicitor apprentice, as I say, but that's great. No age limit.
Well, I would love to, even though they're not a solicitor's apprentice, I'd love to get them on our next webinar. So then the next question is from Lynn. Can you do an apprenticeship in Wales?
So this solicitor apprenticeship is for people in England. Wales, because of the devolved system, has a different system for apprenticeships, and they have not gone down the solicitor apprenticeship route in Wales. It may come, but it's not there yet.
Great. And then we've had a question from Tracy. Will firms be expected to provide SQE training as part of the apprenticeship?
Yeah, that picks up on the point that I said, that what firms have to do is give you 20% of your time out of the office. So that's usually 1 day a week in the classroom. But I think it's up to firms to decide how it best suits them, and I think probably some different firms are having different arrangements. And Angelina, Owen and Amy, perhaps you can pick up how that works in your organisations.
Well, that's a good segue, Julie. So let's move on to our apprentices, because actually they're the most interesting sort of the stars of this webinar, because actually they're the ones actually going through apprenticeships themselves. So I was going to ask each of our apprentices, sort of ask them how, tell us a bit about their journey to becoming a solicitor apprentice. And Angelina, perhaps I could start with you.
Thanks, Ben. So I'm a solicitor apprentice at Bailey Wright and Co-Solicitors, and I started off my journey as a Silex apprentice, and I progressed through the Silex apprenticeship onto the solicitor apprenticeship, which is what I'm doing now, and that was actually straight after having completed my GCSEs.
And so how many years are you into it now then?
I'm now in year 4 of my studies, which I am studying with BPP University.
Okay, well, great. Well, as we've mentioned BPP, let's move on to Amy and hear about what was your sort of journey for getting into a solicitor apprentice.
Thanks, Ben. So, as you've already touched on, I was a Paralympic swimmer. So I had a bit of a decision to make. I had to try and decide that, well, if I wanted to make a career for myself post-sport. My story is probably not as straightforward as going straight into an apprenticeship. I actually did start attending university before I decided that it wasn't really the route that I wanted to take. It didn't fit me best as a person, and potentially there was the opportunity to get a lot more out of myself as an apprentice. I originally applied for a paralegal apprenticeship role with BPP, which I finished in 2019, and then started the solicitor apprenticeship in the September of 2019. So I'm in my 3rd year, and also studying with BPP.
Okay, then thanks, Amy. That's great. And Owen, finally, what about your sort of journey?
My journey began at A levels when I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to go to university, and I began to research into apprenticeships. I left university, left my 6th form with no real work experience. It was kind of a last-minute decision, and luckily secured a job as a real estate department assistant in a different law firm in London, Winkle Sherwood, before applying for the paralegal apprenticeship, which was run by Silex in 2017. 2017, and did that for 2 years and completed that apprenticeship, and then started this solicitor apprenticeship. Applied for that and was successful, and I'm now in my 2nd year at the solicitor apprenticeship, which is done by the University of Law.
Brilliant. And thanks, Owen. And we'll go a little bit into sort of that recruitment process, because I know we've got some questions about that. But I suppose opening question or obvious question is, did all of you guys want to become lawyers, or did you sort of fall into it? Perhaps Owen, I'll come to you again. Did you always want to be a lawyer?
Originally, when I think back to when I was a child, no, I didn't originally want to be a lawyer. It was probably something like a marine biologist or working for NASA. But I did, as I took law at A level, I was really interested in it, and I always really liked my history as well, which always went hand in hand with law. And from that point, I began to research into the legal career path, and it really appealed to me, and it was what I wanted to do.
Great. And Angelina, what about you?
So for me, when I realised that I wanted a career in law was when I undertook work experience whilst at school, which I did at a law firm in Birmingham. And it was really from there where I was like, I didn't quite know how I would do it, but I knew that it was a career in law that I wanted to do. And that's when I discovered apprenticeships.
And Amy, obviously you wanted world domination in the swimming pool first, but then what did you always have a sense that you were interested in being a lawyer?
To be honest with you, I had absolutely no idea. Yeah. My plan was to be a swimmer for as long as I could be a swimmer. It was a hobby that I happened to be good at, and we do know that there are Olympians and Paralympians alike that can make careers out of it. I knew for me that it's a sport with a shelf life, and I didn't want to always be Amy the swimmer. I really enjoyed geography at school. So actually when I started uni, it was a geography degree that I was doing. My only interest in law really came from GCSE level. So I really had to take it back to basics and think, if I am going to apply for an apprenticeship, what are my interests? What qualities do I have? And it kind of stemmed from there. I knew that I was very committed, and I like regime, I like rules, I like procedures. So a career in law pretty much fitted what I was used to.
Now that sounds good. And what in particular appealed to you about the apprenticeship route? Because presumably if at university you could have decided, I'll try and transfer to a law degree perhaps. What appealed to you about the apprenticeship route?
I think just the idea of being a young professional really appealed to me. I like the idea of being a young professional around professionals, especially. I think it's an invaluable experience to be around people that are fully trained in the career that you're aspiring to enter into. So for that was a real main drive for me. But also the appeal of no student debt, earning while you're learning, that kind of idea, which I think is becoming more and more popular as people become more aware of apprenticeships.
I could see lots of nods of the head on the no student debt. And Angelina, was that a big appeal to you of the apprenticeship route, or what? I presume it's a variety of things.
Yeah, it most definitely was. I kind of knew from the beginning that I didn't really want to go to university because I just didn't see myself fitting in being away from home. So that was definitely one of the benefits, the fact that you can earn and learn at the same time and get so much experience from being on the job, and the fact that you get to meet so many professionals that from such a young age, you build your confidence, and that's something that really appealed to me.
What about you, Owen? You said you seemed to know when you were doing A-levels you didn't fancy university, so what appealed about the apprenticeship route?
I think the main thing was, as the others have touched on, it's the fact that you are put into a real professional work environment straight away, and that is it's such a good opportunity to learn from a different way. You learn from doing rather than learning from books, and I've always learned better by doing. Obviously it changes on a person, but for me it was such an easy way to kind of understand things by doing it through work rather than learning from a book.
And do you think there's a certain type of person that an apprenticeship might sort of appeal to or work for? Because there'll be people watching this thinking, well, am I the type of person an apprenticeship might be suited for? Is there a type of person, or actually sort of all shapes and sizes could work for it?
I think you have to be able to. The most important thing is a person that's dedicated. They have to be able to put the time in for both the normal work day and also for the study. It is a balancing act, and if you are an efficient person that can balance their time effectively, then you're already one step ahead, and apprenticeship could appeal to you.
What about Amy or Angelina? What's your views on the type of person that might work well to do an apprenticeship?
I'd say the spectrum, in all honesty, is pretty broad. We've already kind of touched on the fact that apprenticeships are accessible to anyone of any age. They're not necessarily just aimed at school leavers or those that have A-levels. I would say one attribute, you just have to be willing to work practically. I know that there are people out there that tend to work better as academics. So if you're a hybrid of both, I think apprenticeships are great for you. Angelina was touching on the hands-on learning, and I just really can't stress how valuable that experience is. There is stuff that I learn at work that I would never, ever have got a chance to until I qualified if I'd taken the original route.
Angelina?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with both Owen and Amy. It's the fact that if I studied at university full time, I probably wouldn't have understood some of the aspects, but now I'm working at the same time. I'm able to apply my knowledge that I've learned at university in the workplace and actually experience it and understand why certain things are done in a particular way. So I think that's been really useful.
And it's probably a good point at which to then, I know people are interested in sort of what does a typical day of an apprentice look like. We've touched upon there's this split between classroom working and sort of most of the time practically in the office. So Angelina, perhaps if you could start off just by telling us a bit about what your typical day or typical week, what type of things are you working on? Is it?
Yeah, sure. So my typical week is quite varied. So as the apprenticeship has progressed, I've progressed onto taking more of a fee earning role. So that could range from client meetings, attending meetings with counsel, attending court and shadowing my colleagues or counsel. So that's kind of like my typical week. And in terms of my studying, we get 20% off the job learning, which I get a Monday off work. But it is pretty flexible because I tend to study after work to make sure that I freed up my weekend so I can have my me time. And then on a Monday, we have an OCR, which is hosted by BPP. So it's just preparing for that in the week in readiness for the Monday.
Well, we all need me time, no more than now. But Owen, yeah, what about you? And I understand you, it was a fairly swift journey, wasn't it? To you starting to doing almost fee earning work and practical, sort of, for want of the better term, work that really mattered and could contribute to the firm.
Yeah, no, I feel very lucky at the fact that my team, so to speak, they dropped me in the deep end with the legal work, and that's not said in a negative way at all. It's really allowed me to learn important work very quickly. I managed my own cases, which I didn't think I'd be doing at this stage of my apprenticeship, to be honest. I know I'm 4 years in nearly with the company, but the fact that they've let me do such a wide range of legal work from such an early start in the apprenticeship has definitely helped me developing. It's definitely a positive thing.
And just what about you, Amy? What's your sort of similar sort of picture to Angelina and Owen in terms of the typical week?
Yeah, probably more similar to Angelina, if I'm being honest. So we both study with BPP, and it seems that we both have Mondays as our study days. In all honesty, I am more of a weekend person for my work. There's nothing more than I enjoy than at 5:30 just closing my laptop and just logging off and going from there. Sort of have my evenings myself. But in terms of my week and when I'm at work, again, very, very varied. I think that's one real pro to being in-house, is the fact that you're given a lot of responsibility, because quite often you're in a smaller team. So for me, from day one, it was.
I think, have we just lost? Amy's just paused on us.
Opportunity and a lot to handle, but I'm enjoying it.
We just missed a tiny bit of what you said there, Amy, but I'm hoping you're back. So I'll go to Owen and Angelina. So we've had a question from Chloe, which sort of linked to this: is how do apprentices find the workload while managing their job role alongside it? Is it pretty tough going, and is it hard to balance the sort of academic study with the day-to-day work? Owen, perhaps do you want to kick off on that?
It can. There are times of the year where it definitely can be. For me, the busiest time of the year on the work side of things is the run up to Christmas. Everyone wants to get their deals done before the year end, and things get a bit manic. But as long as you set aside dedicated time to do your studies, and I've always found it easy to kind of block out a couple of hours in the evening or at the weekends, as Angelina said, then you stay on top of both the study and the work side of things. But in my experience, if ever I've needed any extra time for any study things, my firm is more than accommodating for it. I can't speak to other firms, of course, but mine is very, very understanding of the fact that while I'm also doing a job with them, I'm also studying at the same time. And I think most firms would appreciate that.
What about you, Angelina?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I mean, my colleagues are very supportive, and they know that I also am studying and I have to manage that. So I think it's really important to make sure that you stay organised and you do split that time, and making sure that you are carrying out your studies, and at the same time you put aside some time and making sure that you're getting your work done at work as well.
That's great, and I think we may have lost Amy just for the moment. So hopefully we'll get her back. And Amy, if you are on the line, because we might get her to dial back in, just pipe up. But I suppose one of the questions we've been getting in from quite a few people are variations of: I'm leaving school, I'm considering applying for an apprenticeship. What tips would you have in terms of preparing yourself for the application process? Do you want to go to Angelina first on that one?
Yeah, so I think that personally for me, what stood out is the fact that I actually undertook work experience in a law firm. And I know given the current climate, it's quite difficult to get work experience. So I don't think it's essential. But if you have got some sort of work experience in working in an office, I think employers like to see that you know what sort of things are expected of you. But then I think a basic point is making sure that your CV is pretty much perfect and that you're on top of your spelling and your grammar, because that can sometimes make a key difference. And just also researching the type of law firms that you're applying to, making sure that you know what they're about, what they do, and how you can apply your skills and relate to the areas of law that they practice.
That's great. And what about you, Owen?
Yes, all those things that Angelina said, definitely have your CV up to date and have it perfect. In terms of tweaking your CV towards the firm that you're applying for the role at, you need to make sure that they want to hire you. You need to make sure that you're in line with their ethos almost. A firm will have a way of working, and they will only hire you if you apply yourself to that way of working. So you need to make sure that if they have a massive impact with CSR, corporate social responsibility, mention CSR in your CV and how you're passionate for it. You will stand out by a mile if you do that.
Yeah, and I think I don't think we've got Amy back, although Amy do say if you're online. But actually, I was speaking to Amy about this issue before. Oh, are you back with us, Amy?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure like I said, IT issues, always me.
Well, it's as I said, you're building up luck in other parts of your life, I'm sure, on this. But we were just discussing the recruitment process and tailoring your application. And I know one big thing you said you were very big on. You didn't just sort of splurge loads of firms, did you, in terms of applying for apprenticeship? You were quite focused, weren't you?
I was, yeah. I've always been a believer in quality over quantity. So for that reason, the spare time that I did have whilst I was kind of in the process of trying to leave uni and also trying to apply for different apprenticeships was just really focusing on where could I see myself? What values did I agree with those places? Would I be a good fit? Do they have projects that they work with the community, for example? Does that reflect well?
I think
of firms out there. And
sorry, Amy.
Oh goodness, am I back? Oh, okay, not a problem.
So sorry for anyone who we just had a couple of sound issues there. We've still got Amy, but we've just got her voice, I think, at the moment. But as I say, I think Amy, just in case you missed any of that, she's very focused in terms of targeting where she thinks she'd be a good fit in terms of her job, and tailoring her application very much to what the values and why she thinks she's a good fit for that particular organisation. So we've had a question actually, and I suppose this is Angelina, Owen. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but some people, Charlie's asked about, is there a minimum time you're then obliged to work in a firm after you've completed your apprenticeship? I presume you don't have to discuss in your situation, but presumably that could vary from firm to firm. And Julie, please stick in if you've got insight on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is. I'm not entirely sure. Like you said, I think it varies from firm to firm. But at the end of the 6 years, you do qualify as a solicitor. So I think it would be up to you. And also, if the job's on the table, it'd be up to you if you wanted to take it or if you wanted to apply elsewhere.
And I think one of the things we're hearing from firms is actually one of the great things about apprenticeships is they really get to know the business. You can tailor the training that works well for your business and works well for them. And often apprentices have quite a lot of loyalty to the business because they've had that development. So if it's working well, I suppose ideally both the apprentice should probably want to stay within the firm, and also the firm presumably would like to take the solicitor on because they've developed them. Owen, I don't know whether you had any thoughts on that.
No, I'm the same as Angelina. I don't know of any minimum requirement specifically in my firm. But as you say, if you've been working with someone for 6 to 8 years and you build a great relationship with them, then you're not going to be very likely to leave them when it comes to the end of the apprenticeship.
Yeah, just to jump in there, that's quite right. It'll be a matter of the employment relationship between the apprentice and the law firm afterwards. But Ben's absolutely right. What law firms tell us is that one of the great advantages about apprenticeships is the loyalty and the retention and that ongoing relationship. It's 5 to 6 years is a long time. At the end, that's a really big investment by the employer into the person, but vice versa and the apprentice, who will probably have gone to lots of different parts of the organisation over that time, will know the organisation inside out, so there's in lots lots of cases where it's gone well, there'll be a very strong bond, and that's one of the great gains, as I say, from the law firm point of view.
And we've just had a question come in, sort of linking back to that application and recruitment theme. Somebody's asked about how you apply for apprenticeships. I think, Owen, if I come to you, I think you found the gov.uk website quite useful in trying to sort of search out, and you could filter by where apprenticeships were offered by location and various other criteria. Is that right?
Yeah, the government website is fantastic. It's apprenticeships.gov.uk. As you say, you can choose your location in the country where you are looking for an apprenticeship, and this doesn't just go for legal apprenticeships, but legal ones are on there. And you can search all the apprenticeships that are being offered. I had a quick look actually before we jumped on the call and just did a basic search for London, and there's a list of legal apprenticeships on there, and the link then takes you through to their application process. But it sets out all the basic information that you'd want to know about an apprenticeship, i.e. the time of the course, the roles and responsibilities that you'd be taking on, and what they're looking for you in as a candidate.
That's great. And we've got a question come in from Laura about how much say do you guys get in terms of what you work on and where you've been placed? Perhaps again, we'll come to you, Owen, and then because you're in a bigger firm which presumably does a lot of different areas of law. How much say did you get, or how much you just get told?
I'm trying to remember back to when I got the job. I'm fairly sure we got a preference sheet of where we'd want to go into which department. Obviously, not every department offers an apprenticeship a seat, but there are. Mine, for example, real estate did. And obviously, as I was doing real estate at Winkle Sherwood before, I stuck with real estate, albeit a different form of real estate, going from residential to commercial. But you do have a say in what you want to do. You get your first and second preference. At least that's true for Gowlings. I don't know about other firms, but there was a preference, and everybody got their first seat preference as well.
And presumably, Angelina, it's far more perhaps limited for you because you work in a very small firm who specialises in certain areas of law, which presumably has quite a lot of advantages because you really get to know those areas. But was there any flexibility from in your side? Do you get that in a smaller firm?
Yeah, you do. I mean, we specialise in 3 niche areas of law. So at the moment I'm in the childcare team, but then because we're quite a small team, so we all talk about our cases. So you get knowledge about the other areas of law that we specialise into. But in terms of seats, I've not actually started on that yet. We're doing it more like a training contract. So the first 4 years of my apprenticeship are working towards the degree. And then the last 2 years are kind of essentially like the training contract stage. So that's when I'll be moving seats into another department. And for me, that's in September when I'll go into year 5, that I'll be working in the employment department. So that's how I will transition and work on seats that way.
Excellent. And then, of course, you're also getting the exposure to all the various areas of law through your study. So I suppose, just for people who don't know much about that, how much does what you're studying correlate with what you're practically working on, or is it does it just vary? Again, Owen or Angelina, yeah, you go first.
Yeah, well, yeah, it just varies. It totally depends. There's a lot that I study at university. Sometimes I'm not doing at work, or we don't do it at all. But there'll be certain things which do link in.
And Owen?
Yeah, absolutely the same. At the moment, I'm doing criminal law, but I don't do any of that in my day-to-day work. But when I come around to doing real estate and conveyancing, it will apply directly to what I do in my daily job. And
I'm just checking in. Is Amy? Are you with us or not? I apologise because I can't see.
I'm still here.
Yes, excellent.
I'm still here.
So sorry, I wasn't trying to ignore you. What you let me give you a run. What about you? What's your experience?
So mine is very, very varied. Again, it's that whole idea of being in-house. What I will say is when you're in-house, you are very lucky to be part of a smaller team. And especially in my case, I have an extremely supportive team. So I'm quite confident if there's something in particular I want to get involved with, my manager's always in full support of that. And there will be a plan to get me involved and just to get me as a bit more of a specialist in that area. So at the minute, I do a lot of data protection work. I do a lot of contracting work. But the plan for the future is to progress in contracting, take on more bespoke contracts and also branch into a little bit of property work. So again, there's that flexibility and that real opportunity to dive into different pockets of the business.
and I'm not planning to play you off against each other, Amy, but do you think in-house gives a particular advantage, perhaps, that some things that you might not get if you're working in a firm?
In all honesty, I think it depends on the type of person you are. I'm someone who I really enjoy doing different things every single day. I think I would possibly get a bit bored if I was doing the same things day in, day out. So the beauty of being in-house and being able to have that flexible workload and things you can pick up and drop day to day really does help me. That's not saying that maybe I wouldn't like to be in a firm. I definitely would like to dip my toes into that water and see how I get on. But for the moment, I think in-house definitely suits me more.
And Owen, your toes are well and firmly dipped into a large firm. What do you? What would you say the advantages, if people are weighing up apprentices, of working in a larger firm are?
The first one that comes to mind is the fact that you're not the only apprentice there. Was, for example, when I joined, there was an intake of 18 legal apprentices at the same time over the Birmingham and the London office. There's been more since then. There was a couple that started last year across Birmingham and London. So I think we've got nearly 30 legal apprentices now at the moment at Gowling. And it's like you have your sort of support network, people that are going through the same journey as you. And, you know, we do social events together, and it's a real sense of togetherness. The firm puts us with trainees as well. So the junior talent, so to speak, is well connected. And if ever you have any worries or questions or anything, you can ask your buddy that's assigned to you, and they will help you out.
And presumably, Angelina and Amy, on that point, if you are in an organisation that's perhaps only got one apprentice, you can still get a bit of that network, can't you, through your study? Is that right, Angelina?
Yeah, that is right. So I'm the only apprentice at my law firm, but the intakes at BPP, everybody in my year, we kind of like work together. And most recently, we're about to organise a Teams kind of catch up just to see how we are going on in our studies and if we need any extra support. So the support network is definitely there.
How do you find? And Amy, did you want to chip in on that sort of building a network of apprentices? Do you get to speak to other apprentices?
I would definitely say so. I know that my cohort especially, we have a WhatsApp group. So we don't really have the opportunity much to meet face to face because we're spread out all over the country.
But who does at the moment anyway, I suppose?
Well, yeah, I mean, COVID, I mean, we're being compliant in one way, right? But yeah, it's nice to do that. And also from a professional perspective too, because I am the only apprentice in my team, I think I make more of an effort to network with the wider business because I kind of want to put my name out there. I want to establish myself in the business a little bit more. It can sometimes be lonely, but I think if you are willing to reach out to other people that are like you, so people that are in your cohort, are within your company or your firm, then you're going to be so much better off for it.
Now, we're hearing a really positive story about apprenticeships today, and I think that's quite right because there's some fabulous benefits to going the apprenticeship route, and I know if I was a 17-year-old I'd probably be seriously considering it. But we've had questions asking, but are there downsides? Are there things that you have struggled with going through the apprenticeship route? Perhaps I'll come to you there first, Amy.
So I would say, aside from the challenge of studying and working at the same time, that in itself is a big hurdle that you have to come across, and you have to be dedicated enough to get both done. I would say the biggest problem that I faced was just the stigma around apprenticeships, extended family mostly as well. When I made the decision to leave university, the apprenticeship route was kind of frowned upon, as if it was almost for people that were less intelligent or people that just couldn't cope with university. But as Julie explained at the start of the webinar, it's a full law degree. It's on par with a master's as well as an SQ at the end. There is no doubt about it that it's not an easy route, and I can't stress that enough. I think if you can get past the stigma and you are committed and you're able to juggle all these plates at once, definitely consider an apprenticeship. It's the best thing that I've done.
Angelina, did you want to come in on that? I think we just Angelina's so much didn't want to answer that question. She's just jumped off. So I'll come to you, Owen.
No, I totally agree with Amy. There was a stigma around apprentices, particularly when I was first looking at them. They weren't very well known. They were few and far between. And as Amy says, it isn't a small, easy route. It's a long, hard graft, and that's why you have to be good at your timekeeping, efficient, and really dedicated to the fact that in 6 to 8 years you could be a qualified solicitor. But in terms of any real issues, I haven't had any real issues, and I think myself very lucky for that.
No, that's great, Owen, and it is a shame to hear about that stigma, and you'll see from the screen there's a couple of technical issues because we probably need a technical apprentice on board. Apologies, actually the team here is doing a brilliant job. We've just, as everyone knows, you can have these things happen. But just coming back to you, Owen, do you think that risk around some people seeing the apprentice as a sort of a lesser route, or any stigma, do you think that's changing, and do you think that's been getting better as it's becoming more well established?
Absolutely. I think it was a new idea, and I think that's one of the criticisms of the legal system, is when something new comes about, it tends to scare people before that they actually want to do it and change a bit with the times. But because of the apprenticeships have been so expanded, people have changed their mind about them. Just in terms of from when I first started my apprenticeship to now, I think my team understands that I'm just as capable as a trainee who's gone to university already and doing the job that I do on a daily basis. And I think the stigma will eventually completely disappear.
And I suppose one of our hopes at the SRA is one of the many reasons we're introducing the SQE is that everyone, whether you've gone to university, you're an apprentice, however you've trained, will have to pass the SQE1 and SQE2. So everyone who qualifies will have had to met the same standard. Angelina, I think you're back with us. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. I'm not sure what happened there. Sorry.
That's okay. As I say, we seem to have a bit of a gremlin in the system, but anyway, we can hear you. So we were just talking about, that sort of the struggles, but also picking up upon that, sometimes the perceptions around apprenticeships. And do you think it's becoming a more well-established route where people are more likely to see it as just as valid as any other way of qualifying?
Yes, now definitely, because of the fact that
oh no, I think we've lost Angelina there. Owen may be the last video standing of our apprentices, but I think we've still got Amy. You're still online. So let's Julie, I've just got a couple of questions coming which you might be able just to pick up.
Yeah.
One of them is we've got somebody who's asking, can one get an apprenticeship after doing the LPC?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think the answer would be that wouldn't be a way forward. And I think the reason for that is the LPC is at the same level as an apprenticeship. It's a level 7 qualification like an apprenticeship is, and therefore I think you can't, for technical reasons, then jump from one to the other. What I would say is that if you already have the LPC, then there are obviously what you need to do is get your work experience, so your training contract, and that there are other routes to help if you struggle with getting your training contract, so you can go through equivalent means, and so there are other mechanisms if you're in that place. So it doesn't really the apprenticeship doesn't really work with the LPC. I think it's more I don't know what stage you're at. If you're on the LPC, that's where you are. I think if you've not yet started the LPC, then I think it's a question of choosing whether to go down the LPC route or the apprenticeship route.
And if you've done the LPC, you can actually still switch to taking the SQE if you wanted to qualify that way. One other question for you, Julie, which is slightly more from a firm side, but I think it's probably worth clarifying. Clive's asked, who meets the cost of training and the exams? Is it the firm employing the apprentice, or is it somebody else?
Yeah, so it's a very good and important question. The way that it works is that the cost of the apprenticeship is funded through the apprenticeship levy. All employers with a payroll which costs more than £3 million a year have to contribute to the apprenticeship levy, and then the cost of the apprenticeship are drawn down by that employer from their own apprenticeship levy contributions. If you're a firm that has a payroll below that level, then you don't have to make any contributions, and you can still draw down against the levy fund. So it's paid for out of the apprenticeship levy contributions.
And I suppose on that note, it's worth saying we will likely do a sort of and we've done some in the past, but we'll do one in the future, more law firm and employer focused webinar around apprenticeships, because actually I think particularly smaller firms and some firms might not think this is a route that they've considered, or might not think it's a route they can go down, but actually there are quite a lot of benefits there. And I think we can see from Angelina and Amy today how the quality and caliber of people that you can potentially get into the business to develop. I'm aware that we're sort of coming up to the sort of end of our time, so I wanted to, if I come to you perhaps Angelina, hopefully you're fully back with us now, and just say what would be the sort of final thing you would say to somebody who was considering an apprenticeship but wasn't sure, thought, shall I go to university? What would you say to them, and what would your advice be to them?
I think my advice would be to just do your research and just have a look at what would suit you, because I think it's a very personal thing. If you enjoy the hands-on learning and also being on the job, and there's so many benefits to the apprenticeship, like earning and working at the same time, meeting so many professionals that are like you, and at such a young age you get so much experience. If that's something for you, then I say definitely consider that and just go for it.
And actually, Amy, I know you've said sometimes you've had people say to you, oh, the pay's not that high for if you go into an apprenticeship, it's pretty low, although you are being paid. But people sometimes forget that you're getting all your training and all the costs that you might be incurring through both university, but then there's a cost to training for the SQE and taking the assessment. That there's a big added benefit there, isn't there?
There is a huge benefit, yeah, Ben, definitely. I would say that when you apply for an apprenticeship, and even when you're actively on your apprenticeship, just bear in mind that this is very much the long game. Like you've said, it's not the case that you're going to qualify overnight. So at the same time, you can't expect to pay to reflect that. And just one more thing on the back of what Angelina said, make sure you use the resources available to you. Career advisors can be great at school. Equally, there's Instagram pages, there's social media, LinkedIn's a great tool. So don't just think that you're in it alone. There's lots out there to help you decide whether or not this is the right route. And there's lots of factors to consider around that.
I think that's a really good point, Amy, and a really good point at which for me to give a shout out to one. We at the SRA run a Career in Law Facebook and Instagram page, which is all about helping provide information around a career in law, but in particular the SQE and what it might mean for you. But I also should give a shout out that, Amy, I think you have quite a nice, well-established legal apprentice page on Instagram, and you've said that's a really useful community to find out about experiences and to ask people questions about apprentices. And Angelina, you've jumped on board in the last week or so, haven't you, to legal Instagram, which again you found really useful. So look out for Angelina. And Owen hasn't jumped on board legal Instagram yet, as far as I know, but maybe this webinar will persuade him. Owen, could I just come to you, because I've given sort of Amy and Angelina sort of a final word. Would you have any final advice to anybody?
My final advice for anybody that's looking or thinking about doing an apprenticeship is do your research and look into the firms that are providing apprenticeships. There's a massive range across the country, and it is a very, very good opportunity. It doesn't matter whether you're in London or the Midlands or up north. Most major firms now are doing apprenticeships. They're a brilliant way to become a solicitor. I know it's a bit daunting with the time, the amount of years that you have to do for it, but it's absolutely worth it. And for me, I can't recommend it enough to people.
Thank you, Owen. I think we'll bring the webinar to an end there. I found that a really useful, interesting webinar. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Angelina, Amy and Owen. I would like to point out you don't have to have a vowel at the start of your name to be a solicitor apprentice, but this webinar would seem to suggest it helps. But I think that their insight has been absolutely invaluable. I hope you found it useful too. We would ask you there is a link below this webinar where you can link and just take a couple of minutes to give us feedback on the webinar and how you found things. Was it useful? We're aware we've had a couple of technical issues, so thank you for your patience and also this patience of our speakers muddling through that. But hopefully you've got some really good content out of that. So let us know how it was. Let us know where we can improve. But otherwise, look out for our other webinars on YouTube, and I hope everybody has a good afternoon. I was going to say there has been various, my finger's been bleeding for some reason for this webinar, and there's been a fly landing on my head. So it seems like everything's gone wrong, but ultimately let's all take solace that I haven't appeared as a cat. So otherwise, thank you everybody and have a good afternoon.